ডক্টর তৌফিক, আমার মনে হয় আপনি গ্রাউন্ডটা যখন ফ্লোরটা যখন ওপেন করবেন, লেট দি স্টুডেন্টস টক। আমরা খালি এক্সপার্টদের কথা শুনি, এক্সপার্টদের প্রশ্ন শুনি। Those who are already know about all these things, স্টুডেন্ট থেকে যদি বলেন to participate more, then it becomes more meaningful. লাস্ট টাইম কোনো স্টুডেন্টকে শুনলাম না। ও প্রশ্ন তো আপনার কাছে ছিল, but they didn't participate in live.
Okay, so Assalamu alaikum and good morning, everyone. It is a pleasure to see you all here today at our seminar on impacts of Burma Act on Bangladesh-Myanmar bordering region. This seminar is organized by Center for Peace Studies of the South Asian Institute of Policy and Governance of North-South University. I'm Professor Tawfiq Haq, Director of Center for Peace Studies and SIPG, and also current chair of the Department of Political Science and Sociology. I welcome you all, especially our students and also panelists. I can see that all our panelists have joined virtually and also physically. So our seminar today will be led by 5 panelists who will present on some key issues surrounding the recently passed Burma Act by the United States. So the panelists, I just give a kind of a brief outline of their topic and name first, and then probably when they will start giving their speech, I will give an introduction. So we have with us Dr. Sakhawat Hussain, who will be discussing. Dr. Sakhawat will start the discussion, and he will take us through a comprehensive analysis of the Burma Act itself. Then we have with us Professor 𝒂𝒏𝒈𝒍𝒂𝒅𝒆𝒓 and he is the current Minister of Health and Education of National Unity Government of Myanmar. Dr. 𝒂𝒏𝒈𝒍𝒂𝒅𝒆𝒓 will discuss NUG government's position on the Burma Act. And then we have Dr. Raymond Lu, who is our third panelist, as an assistant professor at the Department of Political Science and Sociology. And Dr. Lu will discuss the implications of Burma Act on the geopolitical space in Bangladesh-Myanmar bordering region. We also have with us His Excellency Shafiur Rahman. And His Excellency Shafiur Rahman is the permanent representative of Bangladesh to the United Nations and also our ambassador to Switzerland. And he will present his piece on Bangladesh's position in the changing southeast border of our country. And then we have Professor Shahidul Haq, former Foreign Secretary and currently professor at SIPG, and he will bring a spotlight to ASEAN perspectives and approaches to the conflict in the Southeast Asia region. We have also probably with us Ms. Thitsa, NUG Foreign Office representative, and at some point of the time, I hope that she will also be giving her inputs. Before going to the topic of today's discussion, let me give you a brief introduction about South Asian Institute of Policy and Governance. This institute is the preeminent research institute with a regional focus on these 2 issues, policy and governance, and is engaged extensively in research publication regarding public policy, governance, peace and conflict, geopolitics, and migration issues. SIPG currently operates 2 journals, the South Asian Journal of Policy and Governance and North-South Journal of Peace and Global Studies. Beyond that, SIPG also published more than 14 books from international publishing houses in last few years, several working papers, policy briefs, and scientific journal articles in index journals. SIPG also offers 2 master's programs. One is our Master's in Public Policy and Governance, offered to civil servants from Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan, and Sri Lanka, in order to enhance their expertise in policy and governance issues. Since 2021, our institute also started offering a new executive master's in policy and governance, and this new program directed towards those working in the embassies, developmental organization, as well as private sector. Outside of academia, our institute also been involved in organizing various training programs and certificate courses. Most recently, SIPG conducted a series of training programs on enhancing negotiation skills of civil servants and other working professionals for a smooth transition of Bangladesh from LDC graduation. SIPG has two centers, the Center for Migration Studies and also Center for Peace Studies. The Center for Peace Studies, which has organized today's event, is an interdisciplinary center that seeks to facilitate the academic study of peace building and the promotion of a resilient society through evidence-based and empirical research. CPS has organized numerous seminars and webinars on a wide variety of issues, including the Russia-Ukraine war, the war in Afghanistan, the Sri Lankan economic crisis, Myanmar's military coup, as well as India-Bangladesh relations. Now come to today's topic. I will very briefly, shortly just give a background of the discussion, especially for our students. This Burma Act, which is basically the abbreviation is the Burma Unified Through Rigorous Military Accountability Act, embedded with the United States National Defense Authorization Act for the fiscal year 2023, was passed late last December and has sent reverberations throughout South and Southeast Asia, eliciting both praise and condemnation from different stakeholders in this region. The act imposes several sanctions on Myanmar's military junta while also signaling America's foreign policy outlook regarding the country. It clearly states the US's support for the democracy movement in Myanmar and its commitment to seeing freedom, human rights, and justice brought to its people. However, the act only explicitly mentions one actor in the simmering conflict, the National Unity Government of Myanmar, and we are so happy that we have two representatives from NUG today in this webinar who have joined virtually. Still, concerns have been raised regarding the particulars of the language used in this act, such as an authorization of non-lethal assistance, which in previous engagement like Syria or Ukraine allowed America to provide military equipment such as armored vehicles and radar instruments to rebel factions. Which, while this has been widely celebrated by the various armed forces fighting the junta, others feared that this may cause the ongoing conflict to escalate. On the other hand, assistance provisions within the act have been significantly reduced. In earlier iterations, the bill had mechanisms to provide assistance to internally displaced persons as well as refugees residing in some surrounding countries. This would have been of significant help to Bangladesh, which is under tremendous pressure from hosting nearly 1 million Rohingyas that have come to seek refuge from junta's atrocities. So with these issues in mind, today we aim to discuss these several topics. I just let you know about the modality. In the first round, we'll request the panelists to talk 5 to 6 minutes. And in the several rounds, we will come back with more questions and also comments from our students and also the faculty members. So I would now like to request our first panelist, Dr. Sakhawat Hussain, to start his presentation. I just give a brief introduction of him. Dr. Sakhawat, I'm sure for our Bangladeshi participants, is a well-known face. He was commissioned in Army in 1966 till his retirement in 1995. And since his retirement, he remained connected with civil society in column writing at home and abroad. He was appointed an election commissioner of Bangladesh in 2007 and successfully conducted national and local elections during his tenure of 5 years. He's a regular commentator in TV and radio, both at home and abroad, and has authored over 32 books in different topics. He is also a senior fellow at South Asian Institute of Policy and Governance. So over to you, Dr. Sakhawat, and I would like to request you to give a brief introduction of the Act itself. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tawfiq, and thank the Peace Institute of SIPG for inviting me and talking on the very, very important subject, if not for Burma alone, it's very important subject for the region, particularly for Bangladesh, because we are heading in a problem, and we might go into deeper problem with what is happening in southeast of Bangladesh, particularly southernmost area, which is contiguous to Myanmar or Burma, with the Arakan, which is known as now Rakhine. And there's the affinity, there has been an historical affinity of this part of the world with the Arakanese and the Rakhines. So what is happening in Rakhine, it's very much concerned with Bangladesh, and then what's happening in Myanmar overall, that's also should be very much concerned with Bangladesh, as things are every day almost deteriorating. Dr. Tawfiq has already given the introduction to the Burma Act, the meaning of Burma, what is Burma, and the act is called for. This is not a new act that just promulgated in 2023. How we are connected, how should we be connected, how we are concerned, I think that will be discussed at the later part of the whole discussion. To me, we are very much getting into the whirlwind of this, how we can discuss later on. Now, Burma Act was, in fact, was introduced in the Congress in 2021. And ultimately, it came as enacted into a law as part of NDAA, December 16, 2022. Now, what are the key provisions you should know, and the students may note if you are interested in that? US policy strongly supports the people of Burma and return to democracy. This is the theme of the whole act. And then there are instruments. What are the instruments? Sanctions. Imposes sanction on various individuals and entities. Already they have sanctioned some of the top generals. They have already sanctioned the Election Commission. They have sanctioned some of the companies which are being run by, alleged to be run by the generals, and some of the companies which are working inside Myanmar. Assistance, very important, please note, authorizes funding the technical assistance for human rights and democracy related programs. So therefore, that means that if I presume that NUG government and its supporters within Myanmar comes in, then there's UN action, which UN is also being connected with it, supports a greater UN action with respect to Burma. That means Myanmar, anything what happens with the UN, they have included UN that UN should support. Now, what are the policies that comes into? The policy of the United States to continue to support the people of Burma in their struggle for democracy, human rights, and justice. And that includes some item which I'm skipping. We'll discuss later on if you want, because Dr. Tawfiq has given me 5 minutes and I don't want to exceed. Anyway, then talking of sanctions, the bill imposes sanctions on the senior officials of military or security forces, state administrative council, any entity that primarily operates in the defense sector of the Burmese economy, as I told you, that the Burma bigger industries are mostly controlled by the generals, either directly or indirectly. Either he's a serving general or is a retired general. Bill also authorizes sanction on, as I said, family members of the sanctioned officials, Myanmar Oil and Gas Enterprise, and other entities, individuals whose actions support the coup and the violation of human rights. These are very serious issues. Assistance. This is very important. Please note, the Burma Act authorizes but does not appropriate funds, providing the authority for the US government to carry out certain activities. This is very important. Certain activity, we do not know what are those activities. Appropriating, that is providing the actual funds to carry out those activities. Burma Act does not specify how much funding is authorized, but what we know is that there's $1 billion, which is with the US, which is off Myanmar, and the minister from NUG would be able to tell us that if at all they are being discussed with that much of money will be appropriated or not. Appropriate in the fiscal year, whatever they have said, 23, and it will continue. And funds do not become available immediately. Funds are for fiscal year 2023 to 2027. That means 4 years that act and the funding would be done. expecting that within these 4 years something will happen. Now, very important, where we come in, or we may get involved, that is the administrative operations, the programs of entities, including the political entities and affiliates of ethnic armed organizations. Please note, this is where we may be drawn in. Pro-democracy movement organizers that support the efforts of establish inclusive representative democracy in Burma. That means EAOs. And then please note that which is not here, but we know particularly these EAOs will be supported, and those EAOs are known as K3C. Karen, Kayan, Kachin, and Chin. Why? It could be a question which could be asked later on, and I may try to answer. Then assistance funding, technical support, non-lethal assistance for Burma's ethnic armed organization, that is People's Defense Force, which is part of the NUG who are fighting in many places now. Now, I don't want to go into detail of how these funds will be used. Funds, I said how it will be available, for whom it will be available. Assistance, technical assistance, I've talked about that it starts with non-lethal, and then what does non-lethal means? There's no specification. I think rifle is also non-lethal as far as I'm concerned, because non-lethal weapons are used across Bangladesh border, saying that this is non-lethal. Then, of course, they have included UN action, and then there are futuristic things that how it is going to work. This is in nutshell, in brief, which I have to tell in 5 minutes. I think I'm within my time, but lastly, I would say we will discuss what is the implication for Bangladesh, because the reason is if there were no Rohingyas, 11 lakhs or 1.1 million, then probably we would not have bothered about what's happening in Burma. But then, first of all, the Rohingyas. Second is few organizations which we hear coming up in the southern hill tract. That is KNF, CNA, and Sharkia. What are their interests? Who are interested in them? And how this is being connected with K3C? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sakwad, for very briefly summarize the whole act. I'm sure that we'll get more opportunity to discuss. My just take on at this stage is that about sanction, that when we'll come back to you, I would like to ask this question that, so Burmese military sanction. So Burmese military junta is living under sanction for more than 40 years. They have learned how to live with sanction. So no, I will come back when the next round. So you just take a point on that. So the sanctions, yeah, has some impact, but we are seeing that even in the Russia-Ukraine war, or even sanctions against Iran, or even Venezuela, these regimes, they have learned that how to live with it, and they actually have many ways succeeded. So what different results do you expect that this time the sanctions will make an effect on the regime? And then probably another round will come on the specific questions to you about implication of security of Bangladesh. So these are the two questions that I in advance put for you. Our next panelist is Professor 𝒂𝒏𝒈𝒍𝒂𝒅, and our special thanks and gratitude that he joined our last event, and also he agreed to join this time. So let me introduce him. Professor 𝒂𝒂𝒑 is a Burmese orthopedic surgeon, physician, and professor who currently serves as the acting union minister for the Ministry of Labor, Immigration and Population, the Minister of Education, and the Minister of Health and Sports since 2nd March 2021 in National Unity Government. He is the current rector of the University of Medicine 1 Yangon since 20 May 2015, and previously served as rector of the University of Medicine 2 Yangon. He acts furthermore as the task force leader for reforming 16 medical-related universities in Myanmar. So, Professor 𝒂𝒂𝒑, our question to you is that what is the position of NUG with the Burma Act, and how this act is becoming functional in terms of its implementation in Myanmar. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor, introducing me. And then thank you for the organizer for inviting me as a panelist to discuss on the important topics on Myanmar and our friends, neighbor, Bangladesh. In this panel, as you all know, I'm not a politician, I'm a doctor. Actually, I know nothing about politics. But now, because of the, this revolution, I have to stand with the people. I have to stand in the right side. And then that is the reason I'm here. And in this panel, I have invited one of my colleagues, Tissa. She is a Secretary of Cabinet of National Unity Government, Myanmar. And she would talk about the Burma Act, because I know very little about Burma Act, because I'm as you all know, I'm doctor, and then I know about the broken bone. And let me talk about our revolution. All the revolutionary forces across Myanmar, as you all know, all the people across the Myanmar have not rested, have not stopped even a single day. Now, 2 years now, in resisting the military and fighting against the military. This is our biggest achievement in this revolution. People participation and people standing strongly together among the different ethnic and people in Myanmar. We have 135 tribes and 100 dialects, very much diverse country. But now we are united together to fight the military. Actually, this revolution has been led by the people of Myanmar, not NUG, not NLD, not CRPH, not NUCC, leading not ethnic organization, leading by the people, for the people in this revolution. People are leading and driving. National Unity Government, I think, as you all know, is a legitimate government formed by the member of elected parliament from the 2020 November election, and leading a leader of the ethnic revolutionary organization. We have de jure and then de facto, together we form a NUG. We are working with national and international stakeholders to achieve both long-term establishment and inclusive democratic union of Myanmar, and then alleviation of the vast and unnecessary suffering that have been imposed onto our people by the military. Not only democracy, but also federalism. This is solution for Myanmar, democracy and federalism. First of all, we would like to thank United States for endorsing Burma Act in 2023 NTAA. Everyone who have worked hard to make this happen. This is certainly a booster for the people of Myanmar, that we are not alone in this. It serves a strong political pressure on the military and signal to them that their brutality and atrocity, I think you all know, I think they bomb. They're not bombing the military, the ethnic and then armed organization and PDF. They bombing on the school. They bombing on the hospital. I think, I don't know you heard about that or not. Recently they bomb and they come and shoot with the Mi-35 to the my hospital, our hospital, where orthopedic surgeons are operating. We have to bring the patient to the banker, home-proof banker, and continue operation. You can imagine what's happening in Myanmar. And then should have accountability to global community. We engaging with all revolution groups, including ethnic organization, as Brigadier General already mentioned, K3C, and then the Three Allies, and then all the ethnic organization, we engage with them, and then to represent work as a one unit. priority needs include urgent humanitarian relief, 2 years, and millions of people. And then, we need air defense, we need surveillance system for the civil casualty. We truly appreciate for the, Burma Act, U.S. President to support toward the welfare of our people, our effort to restore the peace and democracy and federalism in Myanmar. We urge other countries, the same, Bangladesh, to show similar support that U.S. has shown us, especially from our neighbor, Bangladesh, China, India, Thailand, and also ASEAN country. The close relation with our neighbor is the key success for regional alliance and stability. We are trying to develop the peaceful federal democratic union, practicing an open, active, and independent foreign policy, not to depend on one single superpower country. That is our, policy. Actually, this revolution is solution for Myanmar, not only for democracy, but also for federalism, that we need to unite among us and 135 tribe, 100 dialect, coming and living together to end our longest civil war in the world, in this earth. Solution for region and solution for Rohingya. People of Myanmar has been revolving to new Myanmar with new mindset. I would like to assure that new Myanmar will be good for everyone in the region. Thank you very much. I would like to invite my colleagues, Tissa, to brief about the, Burma Act. Thank you. Tissa, please.
Thank you so much, Seah, and thank you so much to the organizers of this event for highlighting Myanmar's issue. And so I would like to echo what Professor Zoe Su has just said, that the National Unity Government expressed its full appreciation for the inclusion of the Burma Act in the NDAA for the fiscal year 2023, passed by the United States Congress and signed into the law by the President Biden. So Professor Sakwa has detailed and outlined what Burma Act is and what it includes. So it essentially includes 4 parts: the U.S. policy on Myanmar struggles for democracy and peace, restoration of peace and stability in the country, and the a call for greater efforts at the United Nations, and the authorization of the appropriations for assistance for Burma, and authorization of assistance for efforts against human rights abuses in Myanmar. And the key part is the imposition of the sanctions on the Myanmar military and its affiliated organizations. So this whole act is a key signal against the military coup and its subsequent violation of the human rights and restoration of the peace and stability and the delivery of humanitarian assistance to Myanmar's struggles against the military. So we as the National Unity Government welcome this strong support for the Myanmar's people's legitimate demand for the true democracy and federalism. Like this, we anticipate that all other countries will be supporting Myanmar people in their struggle, and we are working very closely with our allied countries and also ASEAN and the European Union for the fight against the military, and that the negotiation with the United States is happening, how the delivery and the implementation of the Burma Act will shape in the coming months, because it's very early how these detailed information in the Act will come into play and how this will be delivered. So we will work very closely with the ethnic organizations and the different stakeholders participating in this revolution, and will also work closely with the United States States Departments and the ASEAN, EU, and other allied countries. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor 𝒁𝒑 and Ms. Thisar, for giving a brief understanding about NUG's position. So I just want to put some questions at this point of the time for the next round to both of you. And we do understand, it's a simple and academic question. If you feel comfortable, you can answer. If you don't want, that's also fine. I'm reading some of this also recent articles which are saying that this, because Burma is so diverse and there's so many ethnic groups, languages are there, and so many ethnic fighters, and the groups are also now fighting for different forms of federalism. And so I was reading and then realized that some security experts are raising the concern, maybe this is too early to raise that concern, that eventually if this fighting goes on, there is a possibility of a balkanization of Myanmar. I'm not sure that whether I can or get time to explain it, but that means that Myanmar might be divided into separate kind of federal regions and with the different powers and authorities. And so this risk is there because now so many groups are fighting, and there can be this kind of the scenario in the long term. So from NUG point of view, how do you feel this threat, or what is your plan to have a unified Myanmar out of this whole revolution that we are talking about? So that's the question that I put for the next round for two of you. Now we go to the third, our panelist, Dr. Raymond Lu. And Dr. Raymond Lu is a professor at the Department of Political Science and Sociology, and his teaching and research interests include international relations, international comparative studies of genocide and mass atrocities, and the responsibility to protect R2P and humanitarian intervention. He also has specialization on African studies, Africa-China relations, and Chinese foreign policy and Hong Kong politics. Dr. Lu is the author of Responding to Mass Atrocities in Africa, Protection First and Justice Later. So Dr. Lu, I would like to request you to give you a presentation on this specific topic on the geopolitical space in the Bangladesh-Myanmar bordering region and the impact of Burma Act.
Before that, may I just add to you what you asked for the next, since two representatives of the NUG here, particularly Ms. Thisar, if I'm not wrong, if she could very briefly elaborate what are their future plan for the problem that we are facing, that is the Rohingya issue, as they are expecting that we should support NUG. Definitely, this is one question which will be definitely asked by all the Bangladeshis, that if we, presumably, if we support directly or indirectly the NUG and others, how are we going to get these problems solved?
Dr. Raymond.
Good morning. Assalamu alaikum. First of all, thank you very much, South Asian Institute of Policy and Governance, the SIPG, for inviting me to be one of the panelists in this morning's very important seminar on the US Burma Act and the Bangladesh-Myanmar bordering region. Also, thank you very much, Professor 𝒁𝒑, for your very kind and generous introduction. So it's really my honor and a pleasure to be here this morning, along with Ambassador Huq, Dr. 𝒂𝒑, Ambassador Rahman, Professor 𝒁𝒑, and many others. So apart from India, I think the only other country in which Bangladesh shares a common boundary of approximately 271 kilometer, and the maritime border is Myanmar. Right? In many ways, the two countries to share close and intense trade linkages, people-to-people contact and cultural engagements. But yet, despite the fact that the two countries are geographically close to each other, and Myanmar was actually also one of the very first countries to recognize Bangladesh independence in 1972. There has only been just 4 state-level visits taking place by Bangladesh's heads of government to Myanmar. The latest one is in December 2011, when Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina paid an official visit. In a similar vein, state-level visits by Burmese heads of states took place also just 4 times only, back in 1974, 1979, 1980, and 2002. While the scheduled visit of the Burmese president to Bangladesh in July 2012 was postponed. Then what explains this absence of closeness between these two countries? Perhaps this suggests that both Bangladesh and Myanmar, at least politically speaking, don't seem to share a totally friendly relations with each other. It seems like the two issues have been getting in the way of a supposedly friendly bilateral relationship between the two countries in the past decades. First, of course, is the Rohingya refugee crisis. But just like Dr. 𝒂𝒂𝒅 has rightly mentioned, if there was no 1.1 million refugees, Rohingya refugees staying here in Bangladesh, probably we don't have to be concerned or bothered with this. Second, the maritime border demarcation, and the right to explore for oil and gas. In fact, there has been at least some 9 major border conflicts breaking out along, this Myanmar-Bangladesh border from 1978. This is also the year when the first Rohingya exodus started until September last year. As weeks of indiscriminate aerial firing and mortar shelling by the Myanmar military along its border with Bangladesh, and airspace violations by Myanmar have escalated the tension further between the two countries. By the way, I was just reading this memoir written by a former Bangladeshi diplomat. His name is 𝒚𝒂𝒏𝒈𝒍𝒂𝒅𝒆, and the book is entitled Diplomacy in Obscurity. So he described Myanmar as what he said, and I quote, a friendly neighbor, with a not so friendly attitude. But it seems to me, if we just have a closer look at these major conflicts, perhaps this suggests that instead of being a friendly neighbor, Myanmar has actually emerged to be Bangladesh a major competitor, if not a rival. On the one hand, Myanmar has used its strategic location to offer transit facilities to regional powers like India and China and other Southeast Asian countries. On the other hand, Myanmar has consistently obstructed Bangladesh proposal for a southern route of the Asian highway. But instead of taking deeper into addressing the root causes of this perhaps not so friendly bilateral relationship between Bangladesh and Myanmar, I would like to share my 2 observations on how this bordering region may have emerged as a geopolitical flashpoint among the major powers. First, Bangladesh and Myanmar do enjoy important strategic positions in South Asia and Southeast Asia. Simply put, both Myanmar and Bangladesh, they are perceived as a gateway connecting both, between South Asia and Southeast Asia. Also getting access to the Bay of Bengal and the Indian Oceans, which are crucial for trade, investment, and navigation. This also partially explains why both China and India have important geopolitical and political and economic interest in both Myanmar and Bangladesh. For China, the bordering region is an important part of China's regional connectivity and economic development. For instance, the Chinese proposal of the Bangladesh, China, India, Myanmar, the BCIM economic corridor, especially the building of a 2,800-kilometer high-speed rail link from Kolkata to Kunming, the so-called K2K, through Bangladesh and Myanmar, would probably become the very first expressway connecting China and Southeast Asia to South Asia. Also, China has emerged as the largest trading partner of both Bangladesh and Myanmar. For instance, according to the Bangladesh Bank, the Central Bank of Bangladesh, Bangladesh has imported some 12.9 billion worth of goods from China in the period 2020 to 2021. And despite Myanmar's significant decline in trade volume following the February 2021 coup, the country traded most with China, which account for over 26% of total trade volume. For India, this bordering region is also proved to be both geopolitically and strategically important. For instance, India has invested a huge amount of money in power plantation projects, in oil and gas, roads and highways, deep sea ports and bridges in Myanmar. Again, just like China, India's objective here is to facilitate its what is known as the Act East policy by enhancing regional economic cooperation. For instance, the Indian proposal of the Colloquium multi-modal transport project, in short the KMTTP, it was aimed to create a multi-modal mode of transport for shipment of cargo from the eastern ports of India to Myanmar, as well as to the northeastern part of India through Myanmar. My second observation. The Rakhine Basin in Myanmar's offshore has been widely acknowledged as what is known as the emerging oil and gas province. In fact, since new discoveries of hydrocarbon in Rakhine Basin in the early 2000s, global oil and gas companies have been involved in the exploration and production of oil and gas with Myanmar. Here, the participation of the Chinese and Indian state-owned corporations, such as the ONGC Limited, which is known as the overseas arms of the Oil and Natural Gas Corporation, the ONGC, and the GAIL Limited, India, formerly known as the Gas Authority of India Limited, China National Offshore Oil Corporation, in short the CNOOC, and China National Petroleum Corporation, CNPC, in the exploration. The construction of gas pipelines are of particular importance. So in this context, both China and India are strongly motivated to establish their presence and exert their influence in Rakhine and the bordering region because of its strategic and economic value. So in the eyes of the Beijing's leaders, this region is one of the focal point of China's Belt and Road Initiative, the BRI, which serves a very important geopolitical objective in offering China an alternative transport route to the Malacca Strait. From New Delhi's perspective, this region is an essential piece of the puzzle of India's Act East policy. This policy aims to prioritize India's relations with its eastern neighbors in order to establish India as a regional power. So just as China's BRI, the geostrategic location of Rakhine and the bordering region are key for India to develop its eastern strategy. So therefore, in a broader sense, what we are witnessing here is a multi-dimensional game being played in this region among India, China, and other regional and major powers. To put it more accurately, China's growing southward presence, India increasing eastward orientation, the rising strategic importance of this resource-rich Rakhine Basin and the bordering region, increasing regional connectivity networks in and around the region, have transformed this Bangladesh-Myanmar bordering region into a new geopolitical flashpoint. Again, the regime change in Myanmar as a result of the military coup, again, the subsequent passage of the U.S. Burma Act, again, its cooperation in the 2023 National Defense Authorization Act, NDAA, okay, which, as also Dr. 𝒂𝒏𝒈𝒍𝒂𝒅 mentioned, which signals U.S. supports and commitments, okay, to the pro-democracy resistance movement in Myanmar, could further, okay, complicate, okay, the geopolitical situation of this region. So thereby making this major power competition in this region even more intense and unpredictable. Okay, I will just simply stop here, but I look forward, okay, to this panel discussion and insights that other panelists are going to share. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Raymond, to bringing this India-China perspective of the whole complications. And my question for you in the next round would be that how China and India would respond to the Burma Act, and so what would be their possible reaction? So that will come to the next round. So now we'll go to Ambassador Shafeeur Rahman. I just give a brief introduction about him, and then we'll go to him with a specific question. His Excellency Ambassador Shafeeur Rahman, currently serving as the permanent representative of Bangladesh to the UN offices in Geneva and Ambassador of Bangladesh to Switzerland. He has also served as the Bangladesh High Commissioner to Australia. In his illustrious diplomatic career, Mr. Rahman has served extensively in various capacities, both at headquarters as well as in Bangladesh missions abroad, such as New Delhi, Yangon, Geneva, and Islamabad. He was also ambassador. Yeah, he was the ambassador, and for a very critical time. Yeah, he also served as a director SAARC secretary in Kathmandu, and we invited him several times before, and know that he is a Myanmar specialist within the Foreign Office and also in Bangladesh. So, Ambassador Shafeeur, our question to you that if you can highlight that how Bangladesh's position will be evolved in the changing the southeast border situation because of this Burma Act. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Professor Tawfiq, and very good morning from Geneva, quite wintry in the early morning. And I also thank SIPG and CPS for inviting me to be part of this distinguished panel, to be able to share my thoughts with such a distinguished group of people and try to learn. And I must also add here in the very beginning that I am out of Myanmar for more than 5 years now, and my firm touches with Myanmar is getting fainter by the day. And when I speak on this subject, this will be primarily my own perception, and I do not say that this has got any, direct or indirect endorsement of Bangladesh's policy. This is purely an academic angle that I will try to bring in. So I will, before getting into the policy options that are available for Bangladesh, try to dilate on where Professor Raymond Lowe has stopped. He has articulated on the intricacies of this region where major neighboring powers as well as international players are interested in. So here we know about the situation that Professor Lowe has explained in great detail, but I will touch upon a few missing puzzles here. As far as our East is concerned and Bangladesh's relations with Myanmar is concerned, and our immediate focus is certainly Rakhine, Arakan. Now, one thing we must understand very clearly is that the imbroglio of Rakhine cannot be solved on its own. It has to be solved in the greater context of Myanmar. There cannot be any solution to Rakhine without having a respectable working arrangement in Myanmar. So that has to be understood. Otherwise, we will always try to come to short-term, solutions and recommendations, which ultimately won't work. So that is what I will say in the very beginning. As far as the Rakhine landscape is concerned, although Dr. Shekhawat has mentioned, we must very clearly understand that from say 2017-18 till now in the next 5 years, we have seen emergence of Arakan Army as the major player in this, the most important player here. The bilateral engagements with Myanmar then was with a different kind of operators, but now anything that Bangladesh and Myanmar will have to do in Rakhine will have to also take into consideration the position taken by the Arakan Army, the outfit that actually controls the majority of Rakhine, if not in the daytime, but certainly during the night. So there cannot be any solution without keeping Arakan Army outside the equation. That is most important. And we must also bear in mind that its aspiration, the aspiration of self-determination for Rakhine on part of the Arakan Army, what exactly it means. The concern that is being expressed by everybody on the possibility of breaking apart of Myanmar, the balkanization of it, that is something is very concerning, and that is has to be understood in all its dimensions. So the territorial integrity of Myanmar is something that we have to understand, and we have to also allow the Myanmaris to come to a resolution to it. And in that, I think the only solution that one can think of is an inclusive federal kind of approach through which Rakhine can be stabilized. But as I said, that here we have to have very high focus on what Arakan Army says and what Arakan Army means, and ultimately what Arakan Army does. So this is something we have to bear in mind. There are other players like ANP, which has played a very significant role in the marginalization of the Rohingya from say 2012 to 2016 and creating the genocidal base. But ANP has significantly weakened in the recent time. We know about Tatmadaw. I won't go into that, but I build on what Mr. Lau said. The expectations of the major players is very important here. Now we know about the Indian expectation, and I won't go into that, but suffice to say that India has very serious stake in Myanmar, and in particular in Rakhine and Chin state. And one is security aspect of it, and India doesn't want its northeast to be destabilized for anything that happens in the Myanmar side, either in Sagaing or in Chin state or in Rakhine state. So India is willing to bargain anything to buy stability in its own land. That is a big problem that Bangladesh faces while it tries to find a solution to Myanmar. So for India, this is in a way is a non-negotiable aspect. So with that non-negotiable aspect of India, what India can offer for this stability of this region is an important aspect, and whether India can offer anything at all if India is too moved to its security concern and depends solely on Myanmar to ensure its security in the northeast. And so that the Mizo and Naga insurgency and all kind of insurgency that was happening in the northeast earlier in full force will not recur again. So these are the concerns, and as well as the others, connectivity related concerns and expectations on India on part of India are there. The Chinese assurance and expectations are quite well known, and I won't go into that. But what we haven't heard so far today is on the other most important player that normally we do not talk about, is Thailand. As far as my understanding goes, the sanction regime that was tried many times in the past, it didn't work out, not because of the role of the West or for China or India. It didn't work primarily for 3-4 countries, and Thailand being the #1 player here. Because the Thai had always had a different kind of attitude toward Myanmar, and that has to be well understood. So I will try to dive a little bit on the Thai situation here. We know that Thai, particularly after the military took over in 2014, has a different kind of approach. They have full engagement with Myanmar military. Both sides are quite comfortable with each other. And for Thailand, in fact, this ASEAN 5-point is actually a wonderful fig leaf to delay taking any position on that, while it continues to have its own approaches to secure its national interest. And the other important aspect, and in a way symbiotic relationship between the Thai regime and so the Myanmar regime, is on their dependence on each other, one on security, the other on economy, particularly on raw and unskilled labor, and the migrant worker. This migration policy of Thailand is very important. And this 3 to 5 million Myanmarese unskilled labor is actually helping Thailand to continue, its exploration of the sea resources. That is number one, and also in the manufacturing as well as the tourism sectors of Thailand. So these are actually giving a lot of benefit to Thailand, and so Thailand is not at all concerned about these 3 to 5 million workers there, and they also have a carrot-and-stick policy. Whenever there is the necessity, they can deport some. So that is there. It is having a wonderful arrangement. In one way, it is having good relations with the Tatmadaw, and at the same time, it is also allowing limited engagement with others while not publicly recognizing them. It allows the resistant forces to come, cross over at any point of time, and stay there. The dissidents are there, ethnic armed groups are all there in Chiang Mai and the neighboring regions. And across the border, they have relations with the Karen, Mon, Sham outfits. These are all continuing for decades, so there is no problem as far as Thai Myanmar is concerned. Most importantly, neither the Thai nor the Myanmar is considered one as security to the other, which is not true in case of Rakhine and Rakhine and Rohingya, and then to Bangladesh. So this brings in the newer kind of dimension. So without Thai involvement in it, whatever we call it under Burma Act or any sanction on any regime that we talk about, this will have full of leakages. And with those kind of leakages, nothing will be effective. So that is, would be my observation as far as the players are concerned. I have my own, understanding of Bangladesh's compulsions and shrinking policy space, and the possibility of taking some initiatives on part of Bangladesh, which I think I would like to dilate at a later round of discussion. I think I will stop here.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador Shufur. And exactly, I have the question in mind about that. When we come to the next round, that for having a stability of the region, then what could be the possible position of Bangladesh, like keeping distance from big power rivalry or taking side with overall spirit of Burma Act? So in your view, which side that Bangladesh will probably venture? So in next round, if you can just address those. So now we come to the last panelist of this seminar, Professor Shahidul Haq. Let me introduce him first, and then I will specifically ask question to him. So Ambassador Haq is a professor at the South Asian Institute of Policy and Governance, North University. He is also currently occupies ICCR Bangabandhu Chair at the University of Delhi, India. Ambassador Haq served as the Foreign Secretary of Bangladesh from 2013 to 2019 and has led the Bangladesh delegation to the negotiation with Myanmar associated with the Rohingya issue. He has co-authored a book titled Migration Myth in Policy and Practice. He has also written book chapters and articles on Rohingya issue, migration, climate change, and other topics. So over to you, Professor Haq. And the question is that how the ASEAN countries are reflecting on this Burma Act.
Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Tawfiq. All protocol observed, so that we can move into the issue. Now, before I go into how ASEAN approaches this particular area, I want to draw your attention to two, three areas. Number one, Lao has brought the whole narrative that one of my very senior colleague, Ambassador Himayatuddin, wrote in his book, Diplomacy. But from our experience, we see Myanmar as a near but far neighbor. Near
but very far neighbor. So that will capture the frame and the narrative. So that's one. Second, on the whole issue of balkanization, since I'm no longer in the government, I have the liberty to speculate and suggest. Now, the border that has been drawn and redrawn, and that's why we are calling it a bordering region between Bangladesh and Myanmar, not between the two countries as such, is not yet completed. The border between Bangladesh and Myanmar has been drawn and redrawn in 1885 last by the British, and then 1935 when British decided to take Myanmar out of Indian continent and given independence, which eventually in 1948 it got liberated. But with Bangladesh, its border kept on being redrawn, may not be geographically but politically, both in terms of 1947 as part of Pakistan and then 1971 as part of independent Bangladesh. So is that the end of redrawing? I don't suggest, because cartographers are globally very active in creating all kinds of a map. So that's something we need to keep in mind. So coming back to the Burma Act, I think we need to see there are a couple of things that has happened over the last 3-4 months. Very interesting. Burma Act is very important, but Security Council for the first time has taken a resolution. So big achievement. Big, although it's not one of the most idle, but it has come into being. So, and if you read, and Brigadier Shekhawat has already suggested that the Burma Act has also put tremendous amount of pressure on the UN to act, which is very interesting to see. Something coming out of the United States and suggesting that UN should be more active in terms of democracy, rule of law, and governance. So that's very important. So that's the link. And the third is there's a confirm. For the first time, there is a legal opinion in the UN circle saying that the Myanmar government is illegal and illegitimate. This came out in this month actually from Geneva, giving an opinion by the special rapporteur that the government is not legal. That means it's highly unlikely that the Myanmar military government would be recognized by any of the UN agencies and countries. So that's, we see that that even the best friend of Myanmar military is not recognizing. So we have to take that into consideration when we look at the Burma Act on this. Now, whether Burma Act will initiate a process whereby a relatively low conflict will escalate into a large conflict or not, that we have to see. But these are some of the elements where Security Council has come in. The Myanmar military government has not been recognized, said that it's an illegal government by a global body, and the Burma Act need to be taken into consideration. Coming back to the ASEAN, ASEAN is considered by the Western world as the center of Indo-Pacific, and they have given ASEAN a major role to play in resolving the Myanmar crisis, bringing in a democracy, rule of law, and normalcy. Now, having received that much of an attention, they have, on the case of Myanmar, has terribly failed us, absolutely failed us. ASEAN has been consistently and blatantly disregarding human rights violation, genocide that has been perpetrated against Rohingya community. So let me be very clear. So on ASEAN, Bangladesh has very little faith in terms of how much they will do to bring justice and, of course, protection for the Rohingya communities, or for that matter, in removing or a regime change in Myanmar. bringing a civilian government, overthrowing the military government. So that's kind of an opening. Now, why ASEAN behaves the way it behaves? It is an organization which was established in the wake of Cold War. As you remember, there was a fear in 60s, even in 50s, that the communist revolutionaries will take over Asia. So there was a huge kind of a backlash from the Western world that you have to stop communism. And in that conflict, the ASEAN was created. So ASEAN was created out of a Cold War sentiments. Now, whether it has transferred into a more pragmatic, more realistic organization, that yet to be seen. Now, very interesting, it came out with a charter after long debate in 2004. Now, if you read the charter of ASEAN, you will see that it focuses on stability, security, very kind of a fear-centric organization, and peace, as opposed to democracy, people's right, and other things. So the organization itself is not balanced. I'm yet to find an organization where human rights are given a second seat as opposed to the peace, security, and stability. So that also speaks about the sentiment of the 10 countries that sit in the ASEAN. So two points to very precisely. I'll try and wrap it up soon. Now, having said this, in my own experience interacting with some of the ASEAN countries is horrific, absolutely frustrating. And some of the countries I'll not name has even acted against the interest of Rohingyas, both directly and indirectly. And some of them are holder of Ummah in that. So that's where it comes, and I don't expect much from the ASEAN. And ASEAN, after the military coup, they have not been able to condemn the military coup. They have not been even to come out with a clear kind of a verdict as to whether it is good or bad, the military government. So that's their position. Now, under the pressure of United States, I would call, or the Western world, or saying that you can't have both of the good of the world, you have to take a position on the democracy, if not on the Rohingya issue, which they did. They have barred political leaders participating in the ASEAN summit, which is good. But the so-called 5-point, I call it so-called 5-point agenda that they adopted, which eventually the military leader, the 𝒂𝒏𝒈, has thrown through the window in terms of implementation on bringing democracy and normalcy in ASEAN, has even not mentioned about Rohingyas. So you can see how ASEAN is looking at this area. Now, the latest is, we thought, after Thailand learned his lesson, after Cambodia being the chair of ASEAN learned his lesson, where they were actually snubbed by the military government, including Hun Sen, who is regarded in the ASEAN as a big leader. They got little upset, but at the same, they said, no, we have to have a patience, and we have to work with the military to bring a government where they will also play a role. So, having said this, how they look at the bordering area. In fact, Myanmar has brought ASEAN to our border. So in a sense, ASEAN is our bordering entity. That we have to take into consideration. With ASEAN, we have a very less political engagement. We means Bangladesh. We have tried our best, but somehow or other we couldn't bring their attention towards us because they were looking at West in America, to be very precise, and also a little bit of a China. Now, I'll end with one kind of a statement. Things have changed. The Western world has taken positions and all kinds of things. And the Cambodia-led ASEAN summit just ended last year. December 2022, come out with a statement of recent escalation of violence in Myanmar. Nowhere to be seen anything centering about ethnic minorities, as if that issue doesn't exist. It has been resolved by one statement by Nuuk. No, it hasn't. It hasn't. It's still a very live and an issue which can actually break Myanmar. Myanmar and this region has been drawn and redrawn in terms of a map. It could be again redrawn if the ASEAN and everybody fails to bring the 135, as my distinguished honorable minister said, communities with them. Otherwise, they will continue to fight. And my assumption has lately been also kind of a strengthened by a very globally recognized strategist, Robert Kaplan, has said. He said, democracy will not solve Burma's dilemma of being a mini empire of nationalities, even if it does open the door to a compromise. So democracy is not the full answer of bringing normalcy in this region. The threat of balkanization, which Professor Tawfiq suggested, continue to remain and haunt us. Now, the problem that we have, that Myanmar is just next door to us. If balkanization happens in that, we'll certainly be affected. That's where our concern. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Shazulok, and bringing both these internal and also ASEAN aspects. So my question for you in the next round will be, even though we discussed this in our last webinar on military coup, that what role, because Myanmar's military is an institution, so we all know that. So even if the democratization process happen or not happen, so what role the military will have in future Myanmar, a post Burma Act Myanmar, or whatever we say. So that would be my question. So before going to the second round, I just want to open the floor very quickly so that we can go to the panelists for the final time, because to set the time, we want to finish it by next 20-25 minutes. So I'm opening the floor for our students, faculty members. If you have any questions, queries. No? Okay, Professor Norman, so I'll start, and then students, please raise your hands if you have specific questions, or you can just give comments also.
Thank you very much. I have heard actually very little about the Burma Act itself in the various comments that have been made. And looking at it from the perspective of an American citizen, I think we're making too much ado about something that is basically a paper tiger. I reviewed the Burma Act myself, and the final version that we have as a law is different from what was the bill that was introduced in the House of Representatives and then subsequently in the Senate. And much of what we have there is, at this point, dependent upon the discretion of President Biden, if he chooses to make any action on the basis of what he's authorized to do with that particular act. So maybe you have a different point of view based upon your local regional perception. But in my view, I don't see that anything would happen in terms of any military escalation of conflict, because the situation in terms of subnational ethnic tensions within Myanmar is not something I think the American government would want to engage in any significant way. That's just a comment from my point of view.
Thank you, Mr. Norman. Students, any questions, comments? Yes, please. Can see a hand there.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. My question is that if there is an internal conflict within Myanmar, then what will happen to the Rohingyas that are within the territory of Bangladesh? Like, how will they get moved on to Myanmar, or will they get moved on anyways at all?
Okay,
That's
very
it.
good question. Yeah, we'll come back to the panelists with that. So what would be the fate of Bangladesh, this forcibly displaced Rohingyas who are living in Bangladesh? Will it not be more difficult for their repatriation if the internal conflicts goes up in Myanmar? Any other question? Yes, please. Yeah. Okay, so the question is, how can we ensure the border security between Bangladesh and Myanmar? Okay, we'll come to that. Yeah, another question from the student side.
The panelists already addressed the fact that there are very ambiguous terms used in the Burma Act. So how far can those ambiguous terms lead and bring consequences for us as a nation and for Myanmar? Can you please address that? Thank you.
Very interesting question. So lethal, non-lethal, defined, non-defined terms. Yes, very good question. Any other question from the students? Okay, from faculty members? Okay, so if you have questions, just keep in mind and we see if we have time to come back. So I now go back to again another round very quickly. This round we will can give 3 minutes time to each of the panelists. So the first question we would start with again with our first panelist, 𝑩𝒂𝒏𝒈𝒍𝒂𝒅𝒆𝒓. One question I raised about sanction, how effective it will be, and also as Professor Norman was raising that is Burma Act is a paper tiger, and also implication for security of Bangladesh. I think few of the questions from the student side also came like this.
Thank you very much. 3 minutes. Very quickly, let me go through what UN action says in Burma Act for the professor, whether it is paper tiger or not. Use the voice vote and influence the United States of the influence of the United States to spur greater action by the United Nations and the United Nations Security Council, pushing for, let me read out, a Security Council resolution condemning the coup and calling on the military to cease its violence and release without preconditions all those unjustly detained. Well, you can say it's a paper tiger thing, but where is more, I put a little more emphasis that a Security Council resolution that imposes a global arms embargo against Burma, whether it will come or not, that's another question because it's a Security Council. But then cutting off any assistance through the government while providing humanitarian assistance directly to the people through UN system or NGOs. Last, in the Security Council to consider multilateral sanctions against the military in response to atrocities that's committed. So these are the areas that US wants the Security Council to act. Now coming back to Dr. Tawfik's first question that sanctions have been a regular feature of the Myanmar. There's no doubt about it. But would their sanctions affect or not? But there's, I feel, the slight difference because no other military junta in the past faced what they're facing now. That's one brighter issue. Look at the doctor who is sitting here. You have not seen them before. And then, of course, the Myanmar military is almost back foot and outside the Bamar areas, particularly the heartland of the Myanmar. And second is that there is a NUG government which has been formed, and if not directly recognized, but is being semi-recognized. Only the other day, they have opened up their foreign office in USA, Washington, D.C. So that means that there is some sort of recognition. And then the resistance of the people, particularly the People's Defense Force, which is fighting along with some of the EAOs. And then question came, somebody, I think the ambassador has asked about the Arakan Army. Of course, I also agree that Arakan Army and its supporter UAL is very much a factor for negotiating for Bangladesh in future. Now, which side is the Arakan Army? Apparently, it seems that Arakan Army was not concerned with NUG. But now I see, or we read and we understand that Arakan Army is slowly and gradually is trying to support PDF. That means that Arakan Army is trying to get away from as we think their master is, and that is one thing that we should consider. Bangladesh has to have an option to engage with UAL and Arakan Army as well. Now, the other one is talked about the security issue. That's very important for Bangladesh. I have already mentioned KNA and CNA, KNF and CNA. CNA is not inside Bangladesh. CNA is still National Army, which is 85% population is Christian, so is Mizoram. And the other one I didn't talk because 3 minutes is very difficult to support. So CNA is supporting KNF, which is Kuki National Front in Bangladesh. And interestingly, they are also being supported by the Shakya Islam. That means that Bangladesh security is becoming very precarious in that particular place. And you never know whether they would be supported by Burma Act or not. But the point which I'm trying to make finally is that this is becoming a bigger security issue already. We have seen a fight between RSO and ARSA within our border and inside the Rohingya camp. Now, remember that there are a number of Rohingya children who are coming up at the age of military age, I would say, and they may be recruited in one of this group. But RSO is becoming more stronger in that sense. And lastly, I would say that we have tried to resolve for last 6 years, and here is one foreign secretary, ex-foreign secretary sitting here. Last 6 years, with Eastern help, that is Myanmar, that is China and India, it did not work. Should we then think a Western solution and the balkanization that Professor Tawfiq has talked about? Therefore, we have to rethink and redesign how we are going to resolve this crisis and secure our eastern flank. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sakwat. Let's come to now our second panelist, Professor 𝒒𝒒. There are also some questions for Professor 𝒒𝒒 and also Ms. Thisar from our Zoom, that some questions came in the Zoom link also. So my only one question that I asked, that how this the future federalism will ensure the geographical political integrity of Myanmar, and how NUG will tackle this, the fear of balkanization. It's still a very far-reaching question, but if something like that happens, so is NUG ready to tackle that? So that's the one question. And also Brigadier Sakwat asked the question that what NUG's position will be related with repatriation of Rohingya from here. And similar question came from the Zoom, that one of the Rohingya participants, Mi Thon, asked the question that what will be the stance of NUG if Arakan Army oppose the process of Rohingya repatriation towards this Arakan area. So these are the few questions. So I'll go first to Professor 𝒒𝒒, and if needed, probably Ms. Thisar can also answer. So Professor 𝒒𝒒, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your question. So many questions, and tough question to answer the NUG right now. But I will try to answer. Actually, we believe, NUG believe, I believe in people power, power of the people. People in Myanmar, people in region, people in Rakhine, Rohingya people. I believe in the people power. You know, people are asking peace, justice, and self-determination. Only three, not money. Actually, Myanmar, we don't need money. You already know. We have Himalaya, North, 4 rivers, Delta, and sea. You can imagine, only 54 million people. We don't need money. We are asking for peace, justice, and self-determination. You have to think of what is the root cause of Myanmar. Since 1948, actually our leader have been asking for the federal and democracy. That never happened because of the military. That is a root cause of Myanmar, and root cause of the region, root cause of the Rohingya, root cause of the border. If you take that root cause, everything done. That is solution. I think this is the answer for everybody. I think people power. If you people want to have peace, you will get peace. I don't know, in the region, the people, they don't want peace or not, but definitely Myanmar people, including Rohingya, we want peace, justice, and self-determination. I think that can answer all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. Ms. Thisar, does she want to add anything or?
Thank you so much. To add and complement what Professor Zoiso has said, I would like to reiterate that our Federal Democracy Charter makes very clear that the member states of the Union and people in these states are the original owners of sovereignty. So regardless of the religion or ethnicity, federal democracy is the answer for the future. We understand the pressure Bangladesh government is bearing by hosting our Rohingya people, and we thank the authorities concerned for hosting them. As stated in our policy that we published previously, we are strongly committed to voluntary, safe, and dignified repatriation of Rohingya and the agreements we signed with the neighboring countries. In addition to that, I'm very fascinated by the very honest and transparent discussions that everyone has made today, including the ambassador, the Professor Haig, about the ASEAN and Thai and the relationship with China and India. So you would recognize that the people of Myanmar has stood very strongly for the past 2 years in the fight against this military dictatorship and our return for self-determination and for the building of federal democratic country. So what I would like to reiterate is that we will win this fight against the military with or without the help of the international community. However, we very much understand that the world is together, and in this 21st century, 22nd century or 21st century, whatever, we cannot solve Myanmar issues in isolation. So NUG would very much like to urge that the superpower nations, China, India, and our neighboring countries, Thailand, Bangladesh, and the ASEAN, and the whole world community, like Professor Haig has highlighted, has failed Myanmar and people of Myanmar. But that does not mean that we continue to have to fail. We can address our failures in the past, and we can find the solutions to bring what Myanmar people deserves, which is their human rights, their humanitarian issues, and the immediate need for the humanitarian issues, and the restoration for peace and the building of a more prosperous nation, that every nation and every related stakeholders in the region can put aside the geopolitical multi-level and multi-aspect dimensions of the geopolitical tractions and frictions and vested interest, and that the people of Myanmar do not become the targets of the failures of all these tractions, and that each nation can put aside these differences, vested interests, geopolitical power, and put Myanmar into the right place to bring the stability in the region and globally. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister Professor 𝒑𝒒 and also Ms. Tisa for the very positive and encouraging notes. So now we come to our third panelist with a specific question to Dr. Raymond, that what would be the possible response of China and India towards the Burma Act? So very quickly, Dr. Raymond.
Okay, thank you, Professor Tawfiq, for your question. So the question is about in what ways or how China and India would respond or react, right, to the US Burma Act. But first of all, okay, I'm neither the policy makers of the Chinese government and the Indian government, so definitely I don't have the crystal ball, okay, to predict what exactly the Chinese or the Indian governments would do. But perhaps what I can try to do is to make a kind of speculative or cost and benefit analysis or evaluation. Okay, so talking about China, right? Okay, China. So given the fact that okay, both China and the US okay, are having a kind of tense, difficult, and not hostile relations with each other. So in this sense, I think it is totally unimaginable okay, for China okay, to side with the US by endorsing this passage, the US Burma Act. So in other words, I mean, the option facing the Beijing's leaders is pretty simple and straightforward. Okay, one thing is China is always concerned or wary of okay, any potential US growing influence okay, in Myanmar and also the region. Given the fact that okay, Myanmar is being perceived okay, as a kind of a strategic backyard okay, of the Chinese government. So I think, yeah, as I said, the scenario okay, that I'm thinking that is okay, definitely China will try its very best to consolidate okay, its support okay, of this Myanmar's military junta. Okay, although the Chinese government always has this official rhetoric saying it is not in its position to interfere in the domestic affairs of other countries, but obviously okay, it is in Beijing's interest okay, to secure or to consolidate its support okay, endorsement of the military junta in Myanmar. Three benefits I think that we can see. Number one is doing this would help offsetting again, any potential US influence in Myanmar and the region. Again, second, doing this can help also weakening India's influence and engagement okay, in Myanmar and the region as well. And third, doing this can actually also help increasing Myanmar's economic dependence on China. Okay, so talking about India, I think the option facing India is a bit, I mean, it's not that simple and straightforward comparing to China. I mean, let's say, okay, if India chooses to side with the Myanmar's military junta, okay, then definitely the benefit of doing this is it could help again making itself to retain its influence in the region, acting as a force of counterbalancing China's growing southward expansion. Okay, but of course the cost of doing this is it would actually make India okay, to be perceived okay, by the US not as a very reliable and trustworthy partner. And this is also what the Chinese government call India as a weakest link in the quad. But okay, if India choose to endorse the US-Burma Act side by siding with the US, then of course the benefit of doing this is exactly the opposite, right? Then India definitely will be perceived by the US as a very trustworthy and reliable security partner. Okay, just like Japan and Australia, for example, right? But of course, the cost of doing this is, okay, it will further weaken its influence in the region. And to make things worse, it would actually drive China and Myanmar closer with each other. And so I think this would be my very quick observation. And if you would allow me just a quick response to Professor Norman's comments. Okay, I share your observation that this passage of this US-Burma Act is largely a symbolic move, right? But I mean, there is always a dilemma facing policymakers, right, in terms of doing something or doing nothing, okay, in responding to genocide and mass atrocity. So this is what Nicholas Wheeler's called the saving strangers dilemma. Right? If something is being done, then those outside powers will be accused of interfering in the domestic affairs of other countries. If nothing is being done, then those outside powers will be accused of being a passive bystanders, right? Being morally indifferent by letting those atrocities happen. Right? So there's always a dilemma facing policymakers. But perhaps again, my thinking or my observation is, okay, doing something is definitely better than doing nothing. In other words, having a paper tiger stationed there is better than not having a tiger there at all. Okay, so this is just my very quick and brief response. Okay, thank you very much. Okay.
Very interesting observation, Dr. Raymond, and also you very comprehensively compared these two countries. So now we go to our fourth panelist, Ambassador Shaufiur Rahman. And my question towards him was, you sir also mentioned that since Bangladesh's diplomatic maneuvering space is gradually shrinking for so many reasons in recent times. So what should we do in terms of this Burma Act? Should we kind of keep a distance from this big power rivalry, or taking side with the overall spirit like democratization and peace and security in Myanmar? So what should Bangladesh do? Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Before I get into Bangladesh's possible policy options, let me try to dilate on the balkanization aspect a little bit. Now, if we go to the history, and we will see that as we know Myanmar today geographically, it was never united with all this area that today it has it under its command. Even at the heyday of Aba Kingdom, a big chunk of Shan and Rakhine, etc., were not part of Myanmar. These all become part of Myanmar through the three so-called Anglo-Burman War of 1823, 54, and 1885. So the unification of Burma is, in a way, can be credited to the British. So now, when the British have left, and without having a strong, socio-political construct between various constituents of Myanmar, that was tried through the 1948 Constitution, and that was ultimately thrown out by the Myanmarese military. There is a real chance of disintegration, because many constituents of Myanmar, as we know today, do not fully align themselves with the Burmese, particularly the Burma aspiration. So that remains. Now, how to assure that? That is what I have clearly noted the NUG minister and Madam Thissa articulating the value of federalism. Because in my own understanding, after spending a good number of years in Myanmar, also makes me to believe that perhaps that's the only solution that Myanmar has, to try to follow an inclusive process founded on democracy, participation, and federalism. So that is there. But whether a Burma Act is operationalized in full force, or it is a paper tiger, that's a different debate. But before I get into that, let me also talk about Bangladesh's shrinking policy options. why and how it is impacting Bangladesh. Our Pacific approach certainly has very good rationale and reasons for that, and there are benefits for that. We know that in our region, in our two major powers in the neighborhood, India not very committal either way on this issue. Rather, it would be can be seen to be more, if I may use the word, indulgent to Myanmar. So with that indulgence, Bangladesh has lesser policy space. We know about the Chinese policy. Now, the other problem Bangladesh faces is that Myanmar generally plays outside the international norm. And it doesn't bother on the international expectations and doesn't even respond. It has not responded in the last 4 or 5 decades. So now Myanmar has proved that it is a responsible member in the international community. So for Bangladesh, which is bound by globally recognized principles and try to follow a value-based foreign policy, because of Myanmar's non-responsible behavior in that context makes our task even difficult. And the other geopolitical considerations that we know that we have tried to remain strategically neutral, and perhaps that's the best thing to do. And given the waves of uncertainty coming from the Pacific Ocean into the Indian Ocean in the coming time, I think perhaps that's the best option Bangladesh can follow. But when we follow that strategically neutral option, it has got its own implication on Bangladesh's expectation on the Rohingya repatriation. So both are conflicting in many ways. Now, but as far as the way forward is concerned, I think we will have to perhaps wait and see how this Burma Act is operationalized and what component of it gets priority in this operationalization. The extent of this non-lethal weapons that we talk about, and the other non-defined aspect of it, how those are put into effect is very important. Now, the sanction regime, I have alluded that without the support of a few countries like Thailand to the east of Myanmar, even Singapore and Japan, this will never be effective. So now how these other countries will follow the US lead, if the US is really serious in coming forward with a very tough set of sanctions, that remains a very big uncertainty, imponderables. Now, how the ASEAN behaves, as Professor Shahidul Haq had very clearly said, that the Indonesian chair is what are the expectations and what will happen, and particularly how ASEAN is going to respond when the next step will be taken by the Tatmadaw, the election that is going to happen. If it happens in 7-8 months, what will happen? Another red line will be crossed. So the incapacity of ASEAN, now that will then bring in a new set of challenges for Bangladesh and for that matter, the entire international community. So based on all these imponderables and the challenges, what Bangladesh can do, perhaps at this stage, and also given the need to have some engagement in Rakhine, because Bangladesh cannot afford to remain aloof from what is happening in Rakhine. Last couple of years, we have actually allowed things to move on its own. And now how long can Bangladesh afford that? So I think there would be a merit of having an informal channel of communication with Arakan Army, not on, let me be very clear on this, not on their demand of self-determination on what they will do vis-a-vis Tatmadaw and other Myanmar stakeholders, but on how they would like to see Rohingya repatriation, how would like to integrate the Rohingyas as they return to Rakhine. On these aspects, I think we need to have at least a minimal engagement to have some workable understanding with Arakan Army. Now, as far as Bangladesh's possible engagement with NUG, NUCC and others, I think we'll have to have much greater understanding from them on their approach on the Rohingya, as we understand some bit of it through articulations made in the last two years, but we have to see what exactly they mean when they make those statements. On the question of stable border, very interestingly, for the last, say, 4 to 5 decades, Myanmaris have always a narrative that border with Bangladesh is not stable. But it doesn't say that this instability doesn't come from Bangladesh. It is their own internal problem. They pass on the buck to Bangladesh. There has not been any problem between Bangladesh and Myanmar's forces on that. But then they try to make it and then present to the international community that it is because of Bangladesh this is happening. It's not that. So NUG must understand that this narrative that the Myanmar Tatmadaw has been spreading for the last couple of decades are wrong, and they must come out with very clear understanding of their, appreciation of Bangladesh's contribution in the stability of the entire region. If Bangladesh wanted to create problem for Myanmar, it would have been a very simple affair. In the last, say, from 2012 to 2015-16 onward to 17-18, and now in 2023, there has not been one single instance of Bangladesh trying to play any role in Myanmar and Rakhine. So that must be understood by the Myanmarese leaders who are trying to create a framework of peace, democracy, as the minister has said, and self-determination. And finally, on Bangladesh's value as a partner, as a partner with whom Myanmar can have multi-layered interdependent relations. Between two neighbors, there must be this kind of relations. And if the Myanmaris, the way they have conducted, in my for about 4 years of experience, I can say that there is very little appreciation of Bangladesh's value in Myanmar. There are some imbecile understanding of their own capacity. That is again wrong, because these days each and every country is dependent on the other. So you cannot think yourself superior or inferior to another. You have to find the value of partnership with whoever you are sitting next to. So that is something NUJ and NUCC must reflect, so that Bangladesh then can have a fuller engagement with NUJ as the time ripens. So with that, I think I will say that in the end, Bangladesh's Pacific approach is something that is founded on firm value, and that must continue. And we should not get into misadventurism in trying to, in some way or the other, get involved in internal affairs of another country, whether it is in India or in Myanmar or in Rakhine. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
The communique that I get from various sources of Arakan army, they have softened on the Rohingya. They don't call it Rohingya. They call it the Arakani Muslims. And incidentally, they have also said that they want to resolve this because these are their people. And the information goes whether it is correct or not, that the Arakan army or ULA, the places where they have put their administrator, there are some of the Rohingya elements who are in the administration as well. Now it needs to be changed, it needs to be checked, but their stance have changed, and they want that they should be supported so that they can resolve this crisis, and they recognize that these are the people who are part of Arakan.
Thank you, Ambassador Shofur, for very clearly articulated the Bangladesh's position for last 10 years or 1 decade, and also a kind of a projection that how Bangladesh should continue with the same position probably. We come to the last, our panelist, Professor Shahidul Haq. And then the question is, even though we covered the ASEAN, but now it looks like the balkanization issue and the role of Myanmar military itself in this post-Burma Act situation.
Thank you very much. On the ASEAN, I don't want to spend too much of our time. Only thing that this year, Indonesia would be leading as a chair. We expect something from them as bold as making Myanmar suspended. That's what the discussion going on. But after this, we'll go to Laos. As you know, the Cambodia, Laos, and Thailand, these are the 3 countries which are strongly in favor of the military government. in Myanmar. So not much expectations. We'll see. I personally do not foresee ASEAN taking a strong position, even on the issue of Burma Act. Now, when you talk about ASEAN over the issue of Myanmar and the Rohingya has got divided on the center. One is that what you call the maritime ASEAN countries, led by Malaysia, Indonesia, Brunei, and Singapore. And the other is the Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, and Philippines. So there is a major rift, and some say that this is a test for ASEAN whether it would survive in proper form or it will become a SARC over the years. We'll see. So with that optimism, let me come and sort of address or give two provocative statements. Before I do that, I want especially for our students to realize that there are relations between and among the states, but there are also special relationship when it comes to the bordering region. So that's why the title is we have deliberately chosen the Myanmar-Bangladesh bordering region. Bordering region has its own dynamics because of the history, because of the interactions, because of the similarity and familiarity, and because of the tensions. And we see that pretty clear when it comes to India, Bangladesh. But we have never taken that frame and looked at the border between Bangladesh and Myanmar. We thought it is the whole country that gets involved. For Bangladesh, yes. For Myanmar, no. Because its center is far from the bordering region. So that's a frame that one can use. It will be much clearer as to where is the issue and the tension. So that's it. Now, two provocative questions. One is actually, you should sit down and reflect. Perhaps no country wants to strengthen the peace and stability in this region, because that will tantamount to giving away to the other party, India and China, or West versus China. So that's one. And this is a meeting ground for China, India, and the West, as we know, go to the history. So that's one question. Once you have that, perhaps then you can ask that, no group or country wants to resolve Rohingya crisis because it is serving everybody's interest in various ways. So if you have these two, then you are in a very difficult situations without going into the balkanization. Now that's the reason that is it safer, even under if you assume that no will takes over tomorrow the center and creates a democratic rule of law and governance-based society, which we have seen, we have interacted, we have tried to build a peaceful neighborhood, which terribly disappointed us, led to further deterioration of the relationship. So there isn't a much hope on that, unless my distinguished minister is here. Hope that they learn a lesson from the history and from their own experience, and goes into building a society which is more inclusive, not only in piece of paper, but and everything. And I hope that when the new government comes in, whenever that is, they would not start putting a whole lot of a procedure for determining who is Rohingya and who is Myanmarese and who is Muslim and who is not. The whole kind of a drama that the NLD government played in the past. I hope, and we wanted clear kind of a statement on that. Otherwise, it will be very difficult for the people of Bangladesh, not the government only, to really support the NUG, because our experience is horrible, absolutely horrible, both at the people level and at the government level. So that has to be rectified, which has not been tried. My last kind of a statement is that strategic stability of this region is disturbed due to the action of Myanmar government, not military, Myanmar government. There was a political government in power in those days. We shouldn't forget 2017, 18, 19. it has disturbed strategic stability, which was gradually gaining some bit of its strength. So once you have disturbed that by pushing 1 million, over 1 million people out of your country who are your citizens and saying that, look, nothing to do with it, they are all terrorists, they have to be assassinated, and you committed a genocide. So that you have to remember. Once you do disturb the strategic stability, how do you bring it back? Can you bring it back without a major war? That's the question. Can a group of countries really bring strategic stability in the region without going through a major war? That remains a question. Now, if the war, it's not that you have to really fight between the two military, there are various kinds of a war that we see today. So that's something we need to keep in mind. I'll come into an end. I'll end with a very provocative question coming from one of our faculty. The paper tiger. I would only suggest that try and look at Syria. That's how it started. And look where it has ended. So, so these are just the beginning of a long drawn fight without a war between major powers in settling sphere of influence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we are at the end, and it was a very interesting, thought-provoking, interactive discussion. Thanks for all our participants who joined in Zoom and maybe also Facebook Live. I can still see that the comments are popping up in Zoom and probably some questions. Thanks to the students and also their questions and faculty members. I just summarize and conclude the session by saying that there is no doubt that everyone in this room, we are in favor of the emancipation of the people of Myanmar. And there is a consensus that we want to see that the people who are being oppressed by the military junta, been suffered, been killed, they need to be emancipated. Bangladeshi people wholeheartedly supporting Myanmar people in this fight, in this struggle. We want to see that with our liberation war spirit, that Myanmar people also get fully liberated with this oppressive regime. But by saying that, we are also concerned as a country, as a geographically small country, that the big power rivalry that we are seeing in this region will be difficult for us to take a side. And also it is difficult for us to making a balance. So as many of our speakers said, that Myanmar governments and Myanmar people, they always should be grateful to Bangladesh. Bangladesh never took any provocative positions against Myanmar, even with some temptations, even with some proposals from different parts of corners. So Bangladesh always wanted to have peace with Myanmar. Bangladesh still wants to have peace with Myanmar, especially the Myanmar people. As our Minister of NUG rightly said, that this is a people's war and this is a people's participation. We believe like that. And with that positive note, we want to see that in the coming days, the Myanmar people, they get emancipated, and Bangladesh, as a small physically, geographically small state, also can keep a distance with this big power rivalry and have peace, stability in this region. With that note, thank you all again for participating. The students, especially who have participated, if you want to have a photo session with our panelists, you can come on this side very quickly, and then we have a quick lunch for everyone. You can take a packet while you go outside. So just come here for a photo session.